The town of Makoma was a quiet place, small, sun-warmed, and heavy with old stories. Every evening, when the light began to fade and the last children hurried home, elders whispered tales of talking shadows that once roamed the streets at night. Most people laughed at those stories now, everyone except Zuri. Zuri was 17, soft-spoken, thoughtful, and always a little distant from the noise of the world around her. She lived with her mother in a small brick house on the edge of town, where the streetlights flickered and the forest began. Her father had vanished years ago, leaving only questions and an empty chair at their dinner table. Her mother worked long hours as a nurse at Makoma General. On most nights, Zuri ate dinner alone, listening to the steady hum of the ceiling fan and the ticking clock that seemed louder when no one else was home. But silence was something Zuri had learned to live with. In fact, she sometimes thought the silence spoke back. The dreams since she was a child, Zuri had strange dreams. She'd wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, hearing voices she couldn't see, soft whispers curling around her name. At first, she told her mother, who said it was just nightmares, the kind that come when grief lingers too long. But the whispers never stopped. They faded for a while, then returned stronger each year, like they were waiting for her to listen. Zuri often stood by her bedroom window, staring out into the moonlit streets, trying to make sense of the faint movements she saw in the dark. Shadows seemed to breathe there, stretching, shifting, alive. The night of the blackout. It happened one hot evening in mid-July. The power went out across Makoma. The whole town sank into silence. Zuri lit a small candle and sat on her bed, trying to study by its shaky glow. The air felt heavier than usual, thick and restless. Then she noticed it, the shadow on her wall. At first, it was her own, cast by the candlelight. But as she moved her hand, the shadow did not move with her. Her breath caught. The flame flickered once, and suddenly the walls seemed to breathe. Whispers began to rise around her, low and distant at first, like wind rustling through leaves. Then clearer, then closer, her name. "Zuri!" She froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The shadows rippled across the wall, twisting into strange shapes. Hands, faces, something almost human. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't move. The air felt colder now. The whispers grew louder. Layered voices, male and female, old and young. She whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling. "Who's there?" And then, silence. For a moment, the candle burned steady again. Zuri thought maybe she'd imagined it all. She reached to blow out the flame. But before she could, a voice spoke again. Soft, gentle. "You can hear us again." The words wrapped around her like smoke, chilling and familiar all at once. Her heart pounded, but she didn't move away. The whispers echoed, the shadows pulsed faintly, like they were breathing with her. Zuri's fear began to twist into something else. Curiosity. She leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Again?" she whispered back, though her voice was barely a sound. But the shadows did not answer. They slowly melted back into stillness, fading until her wall was plain once more. Zuri sat frozen long after the candle went out, her heart aching with confusion and wonder. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. Something inside her had awakened, and though she didn't yet understand it, she felt certain of one thing. The shadows had spoken, and they had chosen her. Closing moment. When her mother came home near midnight, she found Zuri sitting by the window, eyes fixed on the moonlit forest beyond the town. Her mother asked, "Did you wait up for me?" Zuri didn't answer right away. She glanced at the shadows in the corner of the room, where the light didn't reach. For just a second, she thought she saw them move again, softly, quietly, like they were listening. Then she smiled faintly and said, I couldn't sleep. Her mother sighed, kissed her forehead, and went to bed. But Zuri stayed awake long after. The whispers were gone, yet she could still feel them, like an echo waiting in the dark. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The sun rose over Makoma like a soft apology after a long night. Birds sang in the distance, and the town came alive with its usual morning sounds, vendors shouting, engines starting, children laughing. But Zuri felt none of it. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the pale morning light sliding across her wall. The same wall that had moved on its own just hours before. Had it really happened? She rubbed her eyes, searching for answers in the daylight. The room looked ordinary again. Her books neatly stacked, her sketches on the wall, her candle burnt down to a stub. Everything was normal, but inside, she wasn't. The next morning, Zuri couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The air around her still felt thick, heavy, like the night had followed her into the day. She grabbed her phone and set it on her dresser, opening the camera app. If the shadows moved again, she would catch them. That night she decided she'd record everything. No one would call her crazy. She replayed last night's scene in her mind, the whisper, the way the wall seemed alive. And that voice? You can hear us again. Again. It meant this wasn't the first time. But when had she ever heard them before? The recording, that night, after her mother left for her hospital shift. Zuri set up her phone and let it record while she slept. In the morning, her heart pounded as she hit play. At first, there was nothing, just her breathing and the hum of the ceiling fan. Then, a faint flicker. The shadows near her bed seemed to stretch, even though she didn't move. A soft voice whispered, "Zuri!" She froze. The recording grew distorted, the sound of something brushing against the mic, like a sigh too close to the phone. And then a second voice, "Find the truth." Her hand trembled as she stopped the video. Her chest felt tight. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from recognition. That second voice sounded familiar, like her father's. At school, the next day, whispers followed her. Not the kind from shadows, but from people. "Did you hear? Zuri's house is cursed. I heard she talks to spirits. She's weird, always staring at walls." She tried to ignore them, but the laughter stung. It wasn't the first time she'd felt out of place, but this time it hurt more. She was carrying something too big, too strange to explain. Only one person didn't laugh. Amara, her closest friend. Amara had always believed in things others didn't, spirits, ancestors, and the legends of Makoma. During lunch, Amara pulled her aside under the old tree behind the school. "I heard what people are saying," Amara said softly. "But Zuri, listen, some shadows aren't just shadows. My grandmother used to tell me about the night ones." Zuri frowned. "The what?" "The night ones," Amara whispered, glancing around. They were spirits that protected Makoma long ago. But when people stopped honoring them, they became restless. Some say they whisper to those who can still hear them, those who were born with the gift. Zuri felt a chill crawl up her spine. Gift or curse? At home that evening, Zuri told her mother about the recording, about the voices calling her name. Her mother sighed tiredly, pulling off her nurse's cap. "Zuri, you've been under stress. Between school, the heat, and your dreams about your father, it's too much. You need rest, not more ghost stories." Zuri's throat tightened. "I'm not making it up." Her mother smiled faintly and brushed her cheek. "I know, sweetheart, but sometimes our minds play tricks when we miss someone." Then she turned away. But Zuri's eyes caught something strange. Her mother's shadow, cast on the wall, moved a heartbeat too late, and for just a second, it flickered, like it wanted to pull free from her. Zuri's breath hitched. She blinked, and the shadow returned to normal, but she knew what she'd seen. foreshadowing that night. When Zuri lay in bed, the whispers came again, faint and fragmented. Do not trust the light. He left before the dawn. Remember the forest. She sat up, heart pounding. The room was darker than usual. The candle's flame swayed as if afraid. The forest, she whispered to herself. That was where her father had gone the day he disappeared. No one ever found him. Her mind raced. Was this what the shadows wanted her to remember? The voice came one last time, softer now, almost kind. We know who you are. Zuri felt tears slide down her cheeks. She didn't know what that meant, but somehow it felt true. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the darkness. She turned off the light and let the shadows fill the room. Listening. Waiting. Because deep down, Zuri knew. The whispers were not done with her yet. The night was heavy with silence. Zuri lay awake, her eyes open to the dark ceiling. The shadows no longer frightened her. They intrigued her. They were alive, whispering things she didn't yet understand. Each night since the recording, she had heard more. Not words, always. Sometimes just feelings. Sadness, longing, warnings. But last night, the message was clear. Go where it began. She knew exactly what that meant. The forest. The forest's edge the next afternoon, after school, Zuri biked toward the edge of town, where the land turned wild and green, where her father had vanished 5 years ago. Her mother never let her go there. That place swallows people, she always said. But Zuri couldn't ignore the pull anymore. When she reached the old dirt road, the air grew colder. The sunlight dimmed as clouds rolled over the horizon, and the trees stood like dark sentinels, ancient and unyielding. Zuri stopped her bike, her heart pounding. She whispered into the quiet, I'm here. Tell me what you want me to see. The forest answered, not with words, but with movement. The shadows between the trees stretched, bending toward her like arms reaching out. And suddenly, she wasn't afraid. Echoes of memory. Zuri stepped inside. The deeper she went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, only the crunch of her shoes on the dry leaves. Then she heard it, faint laughter, a child's voice. Her own voice. She froze. It was a memory, one she hadn't thought of in years. She was 6 again, running through this same forest with her father, chasing fireflies. He was laughing, that deep, warm laugh she'd almost forgotten. But the laughter faded into screams, her father's voice shouting her name. Then, nothing. Zuri gasped, gripping a tree for balance. The memory felt too real. She could almost smell the smoke, hear the echo of his last words. Stay in the light. But now, the shadows whispered back. The light lied. She shivered. What do you mean? She whispered to the air. The forest darkened, as if the trees leaned closer. Shapes began to emerge in the dim light, faint outlines of faces in the shadows. Dozens of them, watching her. Her pulse raced, but she stood her ground. Tell me what happened to him. One of the shadows stepped forward. Tall, familiar, and though it had no face, she knew. Papa. The father's shadow. The air crackled. The figure's edges shimmered as though it was made of smoke and moonlight. Zuri felt warmth instead of fear, like standing near a fire after a long storm. A voice came, faint but clear. Zuri, you can hear me at last. Her chest tightened. Why did you leave? Where did you go? The shadow hesitated. Then it whispered, I didn't leave. I was taken. The forest groaned as wind whipped through the trees. Zuri's heart pounded so loud it drowned the world. Taken by who? She demanded. The shadows around her shifted, restless, murmuring to one another. Then came the answer. From everywhere at once. The Keeper of Light. Zuri stepped back, confused. Light? Isn't light supposed to be good? Not all light is truth, her father's voice said. The Keeper promised peace, but fed on our souls. I tried to stop him, and when I did, he cast me into the shadows. Tears streamed down Zuri's face. Then why are you here now? Because you, my daughter, carry what he fears, the gift to hear us. The bloodline of the voice. Only you can free us. The trees trembled. The shadow of her father reached out, and for a moment she felt his hand brush hers. Warm, real. Follow the whispers. Zuri, they'll lead you to the truth. Then he was gone, swallowed by the forest. The mark Zuri fell to her knees, crying. The ground beneath her pulsed softly, glowing with faint lines, like veins of light running through the soil. When she looked closer, she saw symbols forming in the dirt, ancient, spiraling marks that looked almost alive. Her fingertips brushed one, and pain seared up her arm. She gasped and saw, burned faintly onto her wrist, a small sigil glowing like embers, the same mark from her father's old pendant, the one her mother had hidden after his death. The shadows whispered again, gentle this time. Now he knows you can see. Zuri looked around, terrified. Who? But the forest had already fallen silent. The light dimmed, and the wind returned, cold and sharp. She stumbled back toward her bike, clutching her wrist, the mark still glowing faintly beneath her skin. The shadows had given her answers, but also a warning. And as she reached the edge of the forest, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her own shadow moved in the opposite direction. Zuri couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the forest, the shadows moving, her father's voice fading into the wind, the mark burning faintly on her wrist. The whispers were quiet now, almost too quiet, and that silence terrified her more than anything. The mark awakens by morning. The mark had darkened into an inky spiral, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. When she touched it, her room dimmed, as if light bent away from her. Panicked, she grabbed her father's old pendant from the drawer. It had the same symbol carved into its center. Her mother had kept it locked away for years, calling it bad luck. But now it pulsed in her hand, glowing in rhythm with her wrist. Bad luck? She whispered. Or protection? She didn't notice the figure watching from the hallway. Her mother, eyes wide, face pale as she saw the mark. Where did you get that? Her mother whispered. Zuri turned. You knew about this? Her mother's voice shook. That mark, it's the reason your father disappeared. I told him to destroy it. Why? Because, her mother said, her voice breaking, the keeper doesn't forgive those who steal his light. The truth about the keeper. Her mother sat down heavily, staring at the pendant. Your father was once a guardian of the shrine, a man chosen to protect the flame of the keeper of light. It was an old faith, passed down for generations, but one day he found out what that light really was. Zuri leaned forward, heart pounding. What was it? Her mother's eyes glistened with tears. A prison. That light, it wasn't divine. It was a cage holding the shadows. Our ancestors made a deal to keep them trapped, offering their own souls to maintain the balance. But your father wanted to free them. The shadows, Zuri whispered. They're not evil? Her mother hesitated. No, they're the forgotten, the silenced. The keeper convinced the world they were darkness itself. But the truth, she looked away, the truth is, the keeper feeds on fear. The more we worship the light, the more power he gains. Zuri's stomach twisted. The whispers in her dreams now made sense. The light lied, the manifestation, that night, Makoma lost power. The entire town went black. No streetlights, no lamps, just the heavy hum of silence. Zuri lit a candle. The flame flickered weakly, fighting to stay alive. Then she heard it, a low hum, vibrating through the floorboards. The walls began to glow faintly, golden and unnatural. The light was moving. Zuri backed away as it gathered into shape. A tall, radiant figure forming in her living room, cloaked in brilliance so bright it hurt to look at. The Keeper of Light. His voice was smooth, echoing, filled with a false warmth. "Zuri of the voice, you've wandered too far," her heart thudded. "You killed my father." He defied the order. He let the shadows speak. The Keeper stepped closer, his face half hidden in the glow. "But you, child, you can still serve. Your light belongs to me." The pendant burned in her hand. The shadows in the corners of the room began to stir, faint, trembling. "No," Zuri said, her voice shaking but steady. "You don't own me, and you don't own them." The Keeper's smile flickered. "Without me, there is chaos. Without light, you have nothing." Zuri raised her hand, the mark glowing fiercely. "You're wrong. Without light, we finally see what's real." The shattering light, the room exploded in brilliance. The candle shattered, and the air filled with fragments of light, sharp, screaming, alive. Zuri fell to her knees, clutching her wrist, as shadows poured out of the cracks in the walls. They weren't monsters. They were people, faces of the forgotten, the lost. Her father among them, Zuri. His voice cried through the chaos. "Use the mark. It's not a curse, it's a key." She pressed her hand to the floor. The mark blazed, drawing symbols in a circle of darkness. The shadows swirled around her, merging with the pendant, pulsing in unison. The Keeper roared, "You cannot survive without me." Zuri stood, the shadows rising behind her like a storm. Her eyes glowed deep silver, not with light, but reflection. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we don't need to survive the old way." The shadows surged, the light cracked, and for the first time, it screamed. Aftermath, when the brilliance faded, the room was still. The Keeper was gone. The pendant lay cold and silent on the floor. Zuri knelt, breathing hard, the mark now faint, no longer burning. Around her, the shadows stood quietly, as if waiting. Her father's voice came one last time. "You've broken the veil. The truth will find its place again." Tears filled her eyes. "Will I see you again?" "Always, in the space between light and dark." And then he was gone. Zuri sat alone in the dim glow of dawn, exhausted but at peace. She finally understood. Light and shadow weren't enemies. They were halves of the same truth, and she was the bridge between them. Dawn rose over Makoma like the world taking its first breath. The golden light slipped across rooftops and trees, touching everything gently, as if afraid to break what the night had just mended. Inside her room, Zuri sat by the window, her wrist still faintly marked, her eyes open but distant. The silence was different now. It wasn't heavy. It was alive. For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted. She felt seen. The morning after, the news spread fast. Strange lights, whispers in the wind, an unexplained blackout that had lasted only in Makoma. Some said it was a storm of spirits. Others said it was divine judgment. Zuri stayed quiet. She didn't need to explain what happened. Some truths weren't meant for words. Her mother hadn't spoken much since that night, but there was no fear in her eyes anymore. Only something softer. Understanding. That morning, as Zuri came to the table, her mother was already waiting with 2 cups of tea. "Your father used to drink this every morning," she said quietly. "He said it helped him listen better." Zuri smiled faintly and took the cup. Maybe he was right. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand, brushing her fingers over the faint mark. "It doesn't scare me anymore," she said. "You have his strength, but also his heart." "Use them both," Zuri nodded. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. The return to the forest. A week later, Zuri returned to the forest. It no longer looked menacing. The trees swayed softly, light weaving through the leaves in a dance of gold and shadow. She followed the same path as before, stopping where the mark had first appeared. This time, when she knelt, the earth didn't tremble. It welcomed her. The shadows flickered gently around her, like old friends. "I did what you asked," she whispered. "He's free now." A breeze stirred and the whispers came, faint, warm, familiar. "You did more than free us, Zuri. You reminded the world that darkness can hold light, too." Her father's voice was among them, faint but steady. "I'm proud of you, my little voice." She smiled through tears. "I'm not little anymore." "No," the whisper said. "Now you are the bridge." The trees shimmered, and for a heartbeat, Zuri saw him, standing between light and shadow, smiling. Then he was gone, leaving only peace in his wake. Zuri's gift in the months that followed, Makoma began to change. People started talking about the strange calm that had settled over the town. The nights felt gentler, the air lighter. Zuri began painting again, not just sketches of shadows, but murals that showed both sides of the world. Her art told the story of balance. Dark skies filled with stars, faces half lit and half hidden, hands reaching toward each other from both light and shade. People came from far and wide to see them. They said her work felt alive. At night, she still heard the whispers, not warnings this time, but songs, the voices of the past singing softly through her dreams. She didn't fear them anymore. She joined them. The legacy of light and shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Zuri stood on her rooftop and watched the horizon turn from gold to blue to deep, gentle black. She realized then what her father had tried to teach her, and what the keeper had tried to hide. Light and shadow were never meant to fight. They were meant to understand each other. Without one, the other had no meaning. As night fell, she lifted the pendant to her chest. It glowed faintly, not bright, not dim, just steady. The mark on her wrist answered, pulsing once before fading completely. She whispered to the wind, "Thank you." The shadows moved softly at the edge of the light, bowing like loyal friends. Final reflection years later, people in Makoma still told stories about the girl who spoke to shadows. Some said she was chosen, others said she was cursed. But those who truly listened, who stood in the quiet between sunset and night, said they could still hear her voice in the wind. Not afraid, not alone, just guiding. And if you listen closely, even now, the whispers remain, gentle and eternal. Balance is not found in light or dark, but in the space where both learn to breathe.